I don't think this turned out the way he hoped it would. Welcome to WWH. My name is Andrew Dreamer. Today we are continuing with Universal Monster Month. Thank you for joining us today. Stick around to the very end of this video to find out where we're headed after this. Also, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and head over to Patreon to become a member of the WWH Universe. Again, thank you for being here. Let's get started. Today's subject is the original Frankenstein, released in 1931. It was of course based on the novel of the same name written by Mary Shelley and was the second of the classic monster movies to be released by Universal, after Dracula of course. This was also possibly the most well-known of these films and contains one of the most iconic characters in cinema history. Post a comment right now with your initial thoughts on this film before we dive in. Frankenstein tells the story of a scientist working to create new life using parts from exhumed corpses. His experiment is successful, but the entire village goes into a frenzy when the doctor's monster escapes and wreaks havoc. The kicker is that the monster, while containing the brain of a criminal, is only violent when he's scared or because he doesn't understand what's happening. It was directed by James Whale, who also directed this film's sequel as well as The Invisible Man. It stars Colin Clive, Mae Clarke, and Boris Karloff as the monster, although the film's credits just list a bunch of question marks. They wanted to keep it a secret to create as much fear as possible. Karloff would reprise this role 2 more times in feature films before hanging up his boots. Also, he suffered from chronic back pain throughout his life due to the heavy back brace that he had to wear to portray the monster. This just goes to show the toll it takes on some actors to bring these characters to life. It's not just a wrestling thing. I think people forget about that sometimes. But with all of that out of the way, it's time to head down to the ring for some WWH action. Our film begins in a small village in the Bavarian Alps where Dr. Henry Frankenstein and his hunchback assistant Fritz are piecing together a human body. They get some of the parts from freshly buried bodies and others from recently hanged criminals. They are doing their work in a laboratory that they built in an old watchtower, and the young doctor wants to create life through electricity. But he still needs a brain for his creation. At a nearby school, Henry's former teacher, Dr. Waldman, shows his class 2 brains, one of an average human and one corrupted by criminality.
All of these degenerate characteristics check amazingly with the case history of the dead man before us, whose life was one of brutality, of violence, and murder.
Dr. Frankenstein sends Fritz to steal the healthy brain from the classroom, but the clumsy assistant damages it, so he brings Henry the criminal brain instead, which is honestly the catalyst for this film's entire continuous conflict. Henry's fiancée Elizabeth speaks with her friend Victor, which is Henry's name in the novel, but not in this movie for some reason. Anyway, they talk about how Henry is acting strange and has secluded himself from everyone. They go to Dr. Waldman for help, and he reveals that he is aware of Henry's desire to create life. They are concerned, so they all take a trip up to his lab. When they arrive, Henry is making his final preparations, and there is a lifeless body laying on his table. A storm rages outside as Henry invites them all to watch his experiment. Henry and Fritz raise the table up towards an opening at the top of the tower. The lifeless monster is exposed to the storm and is struck by lightning as Henry's equipment goes crazy in the lab. Once they lower the table back down, the monster stirs and comes to life, giving us this iconic scene.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! Oh, in the name of God! Now I know what it feels like to be God!
Despite looking nasty and grotesque, Frankenstein's monster seems to be an innocent, childlike creature. Henry welcomes his crusty creation to sit in his lab, and it does. But Fritz comes in with a flaming torch that scares the poor monster.
Frankenstein, where is it? Where is it? Ah! Quiet, you fool!
They mistake this fear for aggression and chain it up in the dungeon where Fritz antagonizes it further with the torch. Henry and Waldman hear Fritz's screams and run down to the dungeon. They find that the monster has killed Fritz by hanging him. The monster lunges at them, but they quickly retreat and lock the door behind them before Henry realizes that the monster must be destroyed and prepares a lethal injection to put it down. Their plan is to let the monster out and inject it as it attacks them. So they unlock the door, and when the monster attacks Henry, Waldman injects the drug into the monster's back, causing it to fall to the floor unconscious. Henry then collapses himself from exhaustion. Elizabeth and Henry's father, who is also there, take him home to rest. Henry is worried about the monster, but Waldman assures him that he will destroy it. While Henry is at home resting and preparing for his wedding, Waldman is inspecting the monster. As he prepares to destroy the creation, it springs back to life and strangles the good doctor. The monster then escapes the tower and wanders throughout the area where he encounters a young girl named Maria. She asks him to play a game with her where they take turns tossing these flowers into the lake. When he runs out of flowers, he picks up the little girl and tosses her into the lake, inadvertently drowning her.
No, you're hurting me! No!
This scene was actually removed for the film for several years, like decades even, due to the content of this kill. Back in the village, preparations for the wedding are now complete and Henry is happy with Elizabeth. The wedding will happen as soon as Waldman arrives, but of course, we know that's not going to happen. Victor rushes in and tells them that Waldman has been found murdered. Henry suspects the monster and goes to search for him in the house. The monster then enters Elizabeth's room, causing her to scream. And when the others finally get back to her, they find her in shock and then she passes out. But the monster is nowhere to be found, having escaped yet again. Maria's father arrives in town carrying the body of his daughter. He says she was murdered and the rest of the villagers form a lynch mob to take care of the monster. Henry then joins the search and during this is attacked by his own creation. The monster knocks him unconscious and then carries him to a nearby windmill where he climbs to the top, dragging Henry along the way. Once at the top, he throws Henry off, but his fall is broken by the blades of the windmill, saving his life. Some of the villagers who have now caught up take him back home, while the rest of them set the windmill ablaze. The monster is trapped inside, and we hear his screams as the structure burns. And back at the castle, Henry's father celebrates his son's wedding. And he makes a toast to his future grandchild, setting up this film's sequels. And that is the story of Frankenstein. This movie is truly the definition of a classic monster movie, and to this day, the Frankenstein's monster is one of the most recognizable characters in cinema history. This film generated 3 sequels, a couple crossovers, and even a run-in with Abbott and Costello. Honestly, the timeline of all these movies can get kind of confusing, but there are some things that I really like about this movie and some things that I'm not very fond of. And we'll get to those in just a minute, but right now we do have to take a quick break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with some more WWH action. If you're looking to save 20% off of your order from Redcon1.com, look no further. I have the absolute perfect deal for you. Right now, if you'll go to their website, put some things in your cart, and use code AndrewDreamer at checkout, you will receive 20% off your entire order. It's a really good deal. They have really good products. I use them every day in the gym and my everyday life. I like their apparel. Their t-shirts are very comfortable. So you're sure to find something that you like on their website. So go check them out and use code AndrewDreamer for 20% off at checkout. We are back, and let's not waste any time. Let's head back down to the ring. Jumping right into the positives for Frankenstein, it's gonna start sounding like a broken record, but the runtime of this film is 1 hour and 10 minutes. Another example of not needing a bunch of fluff to tell a story. I also love how sympathetic the monster is. He never wanted to hurt anyone. The only time he ever became aggressive was when he was in fear. He truly was very childlike in his mind, which makes sense considering he just now became living. And speaking of the monster, the design was amazing, and I think it still holds up to this day. Jack Pierce did a phenomenal job with this. Boris Karloff also gives an amazing performance as the monster. He is the embodiment of the character. Several others have portrayed the monster as well, but in my opinion, nobody has ever really come close to Karloff. And the last thing that I'll mention are the set designs. They're simple, but accomplish their job very well, and even make you feel like it's a real Bavarian village. Transitioning to the negatives now. I mentioned the sets as a positive, but sometimes the giant sheets of fabric they use as backdrops appear really wrinkly. Now, you wouldn't have noticed this when the film was originally released, but with the advances into high definition, you definitely can. Also, it honestly makes no sense to me as why they changed the name of Dr. Frankenstein from Victor to Henry in this movie. And on top of that, they made up an entirely new character and named him Victor. I just don't get it. My next negative is that we really don't get a reason why Fritz antagonizes the monster. He just does it for some reason and kind of causes this film's entire conflict. That always annoyed me. But that's all I really have right now to say negative about this film. But if you think that I left anything out, let me know down in the comments. If you haven't seen this movie, you should absolutely check it out. I think it's an essential piece of horror history, and even if you're not a fan of old movies, it's still worth watching. Next time on WWH, we'll be looking at The Invisible Man, continuing along with Universal Monster Month. Yes, it's another rematch, and I'm excited to review it again to see if my feelings have changed at all. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't done that already, turn your notifications on so you never miss any of the action, and leave a like and a comment with your thoughts on this film. And again, thank you for joining us here today. We'll be back very soon on the channel here. But until then, my name is Andrew Dreamer, and this is Wrestling with Horror.